Welcome to the Unveiled Epic channel. Today, we're diving deep into an unexplored historical mystery. Close your eyes if you like. Let the sound of my voice carry you back, gently, softly, all the way back to a quiet summer morning in 1632, when the mist still clung to the low hills of England, and a baby's first cry rose from a small, thatched house in the village of, a cry that would one day quietly change the world forever. The year was 1632, and England was already trembling on the edge of civil war. King Charles I sat uneasily on the throne, and in every village men whispered about ship money and the king's Catholic-leaning wife, while Puritan families like the Lockes gathered in candle-lit rooms to read the Bible and pray for a world made new by reason and righteousness. Into this tense, watchful world came little John, born on the 29th of August. The son of a modest Puritan attorney who had once ridden with Parliament's armies, and a gentle mother whose eyes held the quiet strength of old earth. From his earliest days, the boy was surrounded by books, by the smell of ink and parchment, by the low murmur of serious adult conversation about liberty and conscience, and the rights of Englishmen against a king who believed he ruled by divine right alone. Young John grew up in a house where discipline was firm but never cruel, where curiosity was encouraged as long as it was guided by scripture and good sense. While other boys ran wild across the fields, John preferred to sit by the hearth on long winter evenings, tracing Latin sentences with a small finger while the fire crackled and the wind rattled the shutters. His father told him stories, not fairy tales, but true stories of ancient Rome, of Cicero standing against tyrants, of men who dared to think for themselves even when the world threatened to crush them. And sometimes, on moonlit nights when the rest of the house slept, John would slip outside and walk the ancient tracks that crossed the hills, tracks worn deep by Roman legions and even older peoples, feeling in his bones that the past was not dead, that secrets lay buried just beneath the quiet soil, waiting for someone calm enough, patient enough to listen. By the time he was 15, the Civil War had come, and young John watched from the windows of Westminster School as London burned with passion and gunfire. He saw men die for ideas, saw Parliament execute a king, saw rise and fall, and through it all he kept a small leather-bound journal in which he wrote, in a neat, careful hand, questions no one else seemed to be asking. How do we know what we know? If men can be so wrong about God and government, might they not also be wrong about the very nature of the human soul? Are we born already knowing good and evil, or do we learn it the way we learn to walk and speak, slowly, painfully from the world around us? Oxford received him in 1652, a gray ancient place of stone cloisters and echoing halls where old men in black gowns still lectured on Aristotle, as though the world had never changed. John listened politely, but his heart was elsewhere. He spent nights in hidden corners of the library, candle flames trembling over forbidden books, Descartes in French, revival of Epicurus, the wild new reports coming from the Royal Society about air pumps and blood circulation, and the strange invisible world revealed by Mr. This microscope. And one winter evening, when the frost painted silver on the windows, John discovered something that would stay secret his entire life. Tucked inside a crumbling 14th-century commentary on Aristotle, he found a loose vellum sheet covered in faded Latin. It was a fragment, no more than a few paragraphs, but it spoke in a calm, almost modern voice of the mind as a rasa, a blank slate, owing nothing to innate ideas, everything to sensation and reflection. The name at the bottom was almost worn away, but John could just make out the letters. Per redivivus Aristotle reborn through Epicurus. Someone, centuries earlier, had understood. Someone had seen the truth and hidden it here, between the lines of approved scholasticism, waiting for another quiet rebel to find it. That discovery settled in John's chest like a second heartbeat. He told no one, not his tutors, not even his closest friends. But from that night forward, he carried the knowledge that he was not inventing a philosophy. He was uncovering one, brushing dust from an ancient truth the world had deliberately forgotten because it was too dangerous, too freeing. If the mind was blank at birth, then no king could claim divine authority over it. No priest could demand blind faith. Every human being began equal, and everything after that was education, experience, choice. Years passed like pages turning. He studied medicine, learned to bleed patients and mix tinctures, assisted Robert in his laboratory while glass vessels bubbled and air pumps wheezed in the darkness. And then in 1666, fate, or something very like it, walked into his life in the shape of a proud, sickly nobleman named Cooper, later the Earl of, had come to Oxford to drink the waters for a liver abscess that threatened his life. John, now a quiet, steady man of 34 with thoughtful eyes and a calm voice that could soothe the most frightened patient, performed the surgery that saved him. A silver pipe was inserted and lived. Gratitude turned to friendship, friendship to trust, and soon John found himself leaving the quiet cloisters of Oxford for the dangerous, glittering world of London politics. He moved into Exeter House on the Strand, this great mansion where Whig lords gathered in candle-lit rooms to plot the future of England. There, amid the scent of beeswax and intrigue, John listened as men argued about toleration, about whether Catholics should be allowed to live, about whether a king who turned tyrant could be resisted. And all the while he wrote, quietly, steadily, in a small locked study overlooking the Thames, filling page after page with thoughts that would one day shake the world. He drafted a constitution for the new colony of Carolina across the sea, writing words about liberty and property that would later echo in a Philadelphia hall a century away. He watched rise and fall, watched the popish plot hysteria sweep London like wildfire, watched his patron arrested, tried, and finally forced to flee to Holland where he died alone in a cold attic. And then the hunters came for John himself. One winter night in 1683, as frost glittered on the cobblestones of Oxford, royal messengers arrived with warrants. Friends burned his papers in the hearth while John slipped out a back gate, carrying only a small trunk and the vellum fragment that had started everything. He crossed the channel under false names, lived quietly in Rotterdam and Amsterdam among Dutch merchants and exiled Englishmen, walking canal sides at twilight while windmills turned slowly against blood-red skis. In those years of hiding, he wrote the books that would make him immortal. The Essay Concerning Human Understanding, 4 slow volumes that unfolded like dawn, proving with gentle, relentless logic that every idea in the human mind comes from experience. The 2 treatises of government, written as if in conversation with the ancient fragment he still carried, declaring that men are born free, that government is a trust, and that when trust is broken, the people may take back their power. He almost didn't live to see them published. Spies followed him. Once in a dark Utrecht street, a man with a knife stepped from the shadows. John never knew if he was sent by King James or by jealous scholastics who sensed their world ending. He survived only because a Dutch friend pulled him into a doorway, and the assassin vanished into the night. After that he grew even quieter, more careful, but the writing never stopped. In hidden rooms lit by single candles, he argued with himself on parchment, asking whether a man could be truly free if he feared God's wrath, whether property was truly a natural right or only a convenient fiction, whether tolerance could ever extend to those who refused to tolerate others. The answers came slowly, like light filtering through forest leaves. Then in 1688, the wind changed. William of Orange sailed for England with an army and an invitation written in John's own careful phrases. The glorious revolution unfolded almost bloodlessly, and in February 1689 John sailed home on the same ship that carried Princess Mary, sitting quietly on deck wrapped in a cloak while the cold sea air carried away the last of his fear. London welcomed him as a hero, though he wanted no statues, no titles. He published his books at last, the Essay in 1690, the treatises soon after, and watched with quiet wonder as ideas he had nurtured in exile began to spread like fire through dry grass. Young men read him in coffee houses. Thomas would one day copy entire passages into a rough draft declaring independence. The ancient truth he had uncovered was no longer hidden. In his later years, he retired to Oates in Essex, to a quiet manor house owned by his friend Masham, a brilliant woman who understood his mind better than anyone. There, in rooms filled with books and the scent of applewood smoke, he spent his days writing letters, revising his works, teaching children how to think clearly and fearlessly. He grew thin and frail, troubled by asthma that made every breath a small battle, but his mind stayed luminous. On long autumn evenings, he would sit by the fire while read aloud from his own essay, and he would smile and correct her pronunciation of Latin phrases, or pause to gaze out the window at the turning leaves and say softly, "We are all travelers through this world, my dear, and the only thing we truly own is the quality of our thoughts." On the 28th of October, 1704, the end came gently. He had spent the morning arranging his papers, making sure the vellum fragment, that small, dangerous piece of ancient truth, was safely hidden inside the binding of his personal copy of the essay. In the afternoon, he asked to read from the Bible, not the stern passages of judgment his Puritan childhood had favored, but the gentle ones about love and light. When she reached the part about, "In my Father's house are many mansions," he smiled and said, very quietly, "I have lived to see the foundation of liberty laid in England. I die in peace." Then he closed his eyes, the sunlight of a perfect autumn day falling across his books and papers, across the worn leather journal he had kept since boyhood, across the small silver pipe that had once saved and changed everything. Outside, the Essex wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the scent of wood smoke and turning leaves, and John slipped away as calmly as a candle flame going out when dawn arrives. He never knew how completely his ideas would conquer the world. He never saw the American experiment built on his words, never saw Voltaire carry his books across Europe like torches, never saw ordinary men and women, centuries later, claim the rights he said were theirs from birth. But somewhere in the quiet space between heartbeats, he must have felt it. The long chain of seekers stretching back to that hidden fragment in the Oxford Library and forward into a future where no king could claim to own another man's mind. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. And now, as the last breath leaves John's body and the autumn light holds him in one final golden embrace, something stirs, something older than England, older than Christianity, older even than the Rome whose roads still cross the hills like half-buried bones. It is the fragment. That small, dangerous piece of vellum he carried for 50 years, folded inside the binding of his personal essay, now passes into the hands of Masham, the only person he ever told. She does not cry when he dies. She simply closes his eyes, kisses his forehead the way a daughter might, and then, very quietly, takes the book to the firelit library and slides the vellum out with trembling fingers. She knows what it is. He made her swear to guard it, not to publish it, not yet. "The world is not ready," he whispered one winter night when the asthma was so bad he could barely speak. "They will say I forged it. They will say I lied. But one day, my dear, when men are brave enough to admit they know nothing at birth, then let it be known that we were only remembering what was forgotten long ago." So hides it again, this time inside a hollowed-out copy of Lucretius, the great Epicurean poem that the Church tried to burn out of existence. And there it sleeps, through the rest of the 18th century, while published works travel across oceans and spark revolutions. Reads him in candlelit Monticello and writes life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness with its own cadence in his ear. Voltaire smuggles the essay into France, disguised as a cookery book. In Edinburgh, David wakes from his dogmatic slumbers and realizes that even causation is only habit, not necessity, just as the fragment hinted centuries before anyone dared say it aloud. But the fragment itself waits. It waits through the French Revolution, through the Terror, through Napoleon. It waits while the great libraries of Europe are looted and burned and rebuilt. It waits while a young Prussian named Kant tries to save the world from skepticism by inventing a new kind of innate idea, and fails, because the truth is simpler and far more terrifying. There are no innate ideas. There never were. Only experience, only the slow accumulation of sensation, only the blank page slowly filling with the ink of the world. And then, in 1798, a quiet English clergyman's son named Thomas visits Oates Manor, now owned by distant Masham cousins, looking for manuscript material on population and agriculture. He is shown the library. He is left alone. And because he is curious the way was curious, he pulls out the Lucretius, feels the unnatural weight, and discovers the hidden compartment. He does not tell anyone at first. He takes the fragment back to his rooms in Cambridge, lights a single candle, and reads by its trembling flame. The Latin is archaic, strange, almost pre-Ciceronian. It speaks of the mind as wax, as a tablet wiped clean, as a mirror that reflects only what is placed before it. It quotes Democritus, but in words no surviving text contains. It mentions a school in Ancient where Epicurus himself supposedly taught that even the gods, if they exist, have no innate knowledge, only what their eternal senses have gathered across infinite time. Is shaken. He is a devout Christian. He believes in original sin. And yet here is evidence, evidence older than Christ, that the soul begins empty, that evil is learned, not born. He does nothing for 3 years. Then, in 1801, he publishes his essay on the principle of population anonymously, and buried in a footnote almost no one notices is a strange phrase. As a certain ancient fragment recently come to light suggests, man is not born corrupt, but made so by circumstance. The footnote is missed by almost everyone, but not by everyone. In Paris, a former Jacobin-turned bookseller sees it and remembers a rumor from his days in the revolutionary underground, rumors of a secret tradition, passed down through certain English exiles in Holland, all the way back to a lost school of empiricists who survived the burning of the Alexandria library by hiding their texts in plain sight, inside Aristotelian commentaries where no inquisitor would ever look. The bookseller writes to a friend in Vienna. The friend writes to a Scottish laird who is secretly funding archaeological digs in Syria. And slowly, very slowly, a network begins to form. Quiet men and women who meet in back rooms of coffee houses and speak in low voices about the great forgetting. The moment, sometime in the 4th century BC, when Plato's doctrine of innate forms won the war against sensation, and Western civilization chose to believe we are born already knowing rather than brave enough to admit we must learn everything from scratch. They call themselves the nothing more. No rituals, no oaths, only a shared reverence for the blank slate, and a determination that one day the truth will be safe to speak aloud. Through the 19th century, they watch ideas spread while the fragment itself is in secret, passed from hand to hand like Samizdat. Mary reads a French translation and writes vindication of the rights of woman with tears in her eyes, realizing that if the mind is blank at birth, then every difference between men and women is artificial, learned, unjust. John Stuart Mill grows up reading and the secret commentaries, and becomes the gentlest radical the world has ever seen. Charles, in his quiet-down house study, traces the evolution of mind itself and realizes that even instinct is only inherited experience, written into the body the way ideas are written into the soul. And still the fragment waits for its moment. It waits through 2 world wars, through the burning of books in Berlin, through the gulags and the camps where men were told what to think until they forgot how to think at all. It waits while psychologists argue about nature and nurture, and slowly, painfully, begin to admit that nurture might be far more powerful than anyone had dared believe. Then, in 1947, in a cave near the Dead Sea, a Bedouin shepherd boy throws a rock into a hole and hears the unmistakable sound of pottery breaking. Inside are scrolls, hundreds of them, hidden almost 2,000 years earlier by a Jewish sect called the Essenes. And among them, wrapped in linen and sealed with bitumen, is something no one expected. A Greek text on papyrus, heavily damaged but legible enough to make scholars weep. It is a commentary on Epicurus by a first-century philosopher named Diogenes who, it turns out, had a student named Zeno of Sidon who had a student who carried the teaching all the way to and beyond. The text speaks explicitly of the rasa. It calls the mind a mirror without image until the world writes upon it. It warns that any society built on the lie of innate knowledge will inevitably become tyrannical, because someone will always claim to know what is written on everyone else's soul before they are even born. The Dead Sea fragment and the Masham vellum are compared in secret. The handwriting is different, the medium is different, the languages are different, but the doctrine is identical, word for word in places no forgery could explain. The time has come. In 1953, on the tercentenary of birth, though almost no one remembers the exact date, a small book is published in Geneva by an anonymous author. It contains photographs of both fragments side by side, with a quiet, devastating commentary that simply asks, what if we have been wrong for 2,000 years? What if freedom is not something we must earn, but something we lose the moment we are taught to believe we were born already knowing right from wrong, good from evil, master from slave? The book is ignored by academia. It is attacked as a hoax. It is banned in some countries, burned in others. But it is also translated, passed hand to hand the way theses once were. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the world begins to change. Children are raised differently. Schools stop talking about gifted and slow, as if written in blood. Parents stop saying he was born bad, or she has always been good. Politicians find it harder to claim divine right or natural superiority. Scientists map the brain and discover that, yes, it is astonishingly plastic, rewiring itself with every experience, every book read, every song heard, every gentle or cruel word spoken in childhood. The great lie of innate knowledge dies not with a bang, but with a long, quiet sigh. And somewhere in whatever place calm minds go when the body is finished, John smiles. He never sought fame. He never wanted statues. He only wanted the truth to be safe enough to speak. Now at last it is. The chain is complete. From the forgotten school in Ancient to the candle-lit library in Oxford, to the exile's attic in Rotterdam, to the quiet deathbed in Essex, to the caves by the Dead Sea, to this moment, right now, as you lie in the dark listening to my voice carry you gently towards sleep. The blank slate is not empty. It is full of everything the world has ever been brave enough to teach us. And tomorrow, when you wake, it will be waiting for whatever new experience you choose to write upon it. Good night. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. And now, as your breathing slows and the room around you dissolves into the softest darkness, the story does not end. It only turns another page, quietly, the way a night wind turns leaves in an ancient forest no one remembers planting. The year is 2025, and in a small, unmarked laboratory beneath the old city of Edinburgh, where David once walked and doubted everything, a young neuroscientist named is watching a brain scan bloom across her screen like pale fire. She is not supposed to be here at 3:17 a.m. The grant ran out months ago. The university wants the equipment for something more profitable, but cannot leave. Not yet. Not while the data keeps whispering the same impossible sentence in waves of light and electricity. The adult brain, when all distractions are removed, when every learned fear and habit is quieted through years of careful meditation and sensory deprivation, begins to look exactly like the brain of a newborn. Not similar. Exact. Down to the distribution of alpha waves, down to the default mode network's idle hum. Empty. Rasa. She has repeated the experiment 17 times with 17 different long-term meditators, monks, mystics, one very old nun from a silent order in Brittany who had not spoken aloud in 41 years. Every single one, at the deepest level of stillness, reverts. The slate wipes itself clean. Not damaged. Not regressed. Renewed. Does not publish. She knows what would happen. She would be called a fraud, or worse, a mystic. Funding would vanish. The pills that promised to fix anxiety by rewriting childhood trauma would lose half their market if people knew the brain could rewrite itself. Gently, voluntarily, just by choosing silence long enough. So she keeps the data in a plain folder labeled Continuation 2025. And on the nights when exhaustion makes her brave, she opens another file, one that should not exist. It is a scan of the original vellum fragment, smuggled out of a private collection in Switzerland by a member of the Who died last year and left instructions in a will no lawyer understood. The photographs are high resolution, taken with spectral imaging that reveals ink beneath ink, text beneath text. And there, under the Latin that read, under the Greek that the Dead Sea Scroll confirmed, is another layer. A third language older than either. Not Aramaic. Not Phoenician. Something that predates writing itself. Symbols that look almost like musical notation, or the tracks of birds across wet sand. Has been teaching herself to read it, the way once taught himself to read the world. One symbol at a time. One sleepless night at a time. The deepest layer does not speak of philosophy. It speaks of practice. It describes a technique. A way of sitting. A way of breathing. A way of letting every memory, every name, every story the world ever told you about who you are drift away like smoke through an open window. And when the last story is gone, something happens that the text calls the return. The return is not enlightenment. It is not transcendence. It is simpler and far more terrifying. It is the moment when the mind, perfectly empty, becomes capable of choosing what to write next. Not influenced by childhood, not shaped by culture, not limited by previous trauma. A true second birth. A conscious rasa. The text claims this was once taught everywhere. In the forests of pre-Celtic Europe. In the caves of the Pyrenees, where the last Ice Age hunters painted bulls, and knew that the soul must be periodically erased and redrawn. In the mystery schools of Egypt before the pyramids, when initiates were laid in stone sarcophagi for 3 days and 3 nights, and rose speaking a new name they had chosen for themselves in the dark. All of it lost. All of it deliberately erased when the first kings and priests realized that a population capable of voluntary rebirth could never be permanently enslaved. Found an echo of it. Felt its edge. The Buddha lived it. Jesus may have meant it when he said you must become like a little child again. But none of them had the full instruction. Only fragments. Only whispers. Until now. Has followed the practice for 91 nights. She is close. So close that sometimes, in the hush between heartbeats, she feels the first letter of the old stories begin to fade. Her father's voice telling her she would never be good enough. The boy in secondary school who laughed when she said she wanted to study the mind. The grant committee that called her research unrigorous spirituality dressed as science. All of it thinning. All of it becoming optional. On the 92nd night, the power goes out in the entire building. Emergency lights flicker red. The brain scanner hums down into silence. And in that sudden, perfect darkness hears footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming down the corridor that no one else has access to. She is not afraid. She is curiously, almost peacefully empty. The door opens without a knock. A figure steps inside, tall, hooded, carrying no light. The emergency glow catches just enough of a face. Old, calm, eyes bright with something that looks like recognition. "You're almost there," the figure says. The voice is soft, genderless, ageless. "But you're trying to do it alone. That was never the way." Finds her own voice strangely steady. "Who are you?" "Someone who sat in this same city 250 years ago, trying to finish what started and couldn't. Someone who failed because the world wasn't ready. But you might be." The figure places something on the desk. A small wooden box, ancient, carved with the same bird track symbols. "Inside is the last piece," the stranger says. "The part never found. The part the guarded for two. When you open it, there will be no going back. The slate wipes clean in a single breath. And whatever you choose to write next will be the first true act of a free human being." Silence stretches between them, thick as honey, sweet as sleep. "What happens if I say no?" Whispers. The figure smiles. "Then you'll publish your paper, win your Nobel, grow old wondering why happiness always slipped away 5 minutes after you achieved everything you were told to want. Same as everyone else." Looks at the box. At the dark screen where 17 brains proved the impossible. At the city outside the window, still sleeping under November stars. She reaches out. Her fingers touch the lid. And in that moment, somewhere across centuries, John, who never believed in miracles, who insisted that even the idea of God must come from sensation and reflection, feels something like a hand on his shoulder. A gentle pressure. A quiet voice saying, "It worked." The chain held. The truth made it all the way. Opens the box. There is no flash of light. No angelic choir. Only a single, small, perfectly blank piece of vellum, then bone, smoother than water. And on it nothing. Nothing at all. She lifts it, holds it to her heart, and begins, for the first time in her life, to write. Whatever comes next is up to her. Whatever comes next is up to all of us. The story never ends. It only waits patiently like dawn behind the hills, for the moment we are brave enough to wake up empty and choose who we will be today. Breathe in. Breathe out. The slate is clean. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep deeply. Dream blank. And when you wake, write something beautiful. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. And now, as the blank vellum rests against chest like a sleeping bird, something shifts inside the quiet laboratory. Something so gentle it feels like the building itself exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. The red emergency lights fade to black. The hum of distant traffic on Edinburgh's old stones vanishes. Even the November wind, which moments ago rattled the high windows, falls silent. There is only her heartbeat. Slow, curious, unafraid. She does not think in words anymore. Words were the first things to go. 92 nights of letting them drift away like autumn leaves on the water of. What remains is a kind of listening. The same listening the child John practiced in the fields of when he lay on his back watching clouds, and wondered why one shape became a sheep, and another a castle if no one had told him what to see. Understands now. The clouds were never sheep or castles. They were only water and light, waiting for a mind to write upon them. She lifts the vellum higher, until it covers her eyes like a blindfold made of moonlight. And in that voluntary darkness, the return begins. It is not dramatic. No thunder. No visions of past lives or glowing ancestors. Only a soft unraveling, the way a well-woven tapestry, held too close to the fire, lets its threads loosen one by one until the pattern is gone and only the pure warp and weft remain. First to go is her name. It feels suddenly foreign, like a coat borrowed from someone else's childhood. Then her memories of achievement, the published papers, the prizes, the proud smile of her mother at graduation. All of it dissolves into colorless smoke. Then the wounds, the father who left, the lover who lied, the funding committee that laughed. Gone, not repressed, not forgiven, simply irrelevant, like stories told about someone else's life. When the last thread loosens, there is only stillness. A stillness so complete it is weight, like being underwater in a lock so deep no light has ever touched the bottom. And in that depth, a single choice appears, not as a voice but as a possibility. A blank page asking, with infinite patience, "What now?" She could write anything. She could write the old stories again. Victim, genius, woman, scientist, Scottish, wounded, proud. She could write new ones. Savior, guru, revolutionary, billionaire, saint. The vellum is truly blank. The ink is whatever she decides her life will be from this breath forward. Most people, if they ever reached this place, would panic and scribble the first familiar thing they could remember. That is why the technique was hidden. That is why empires burned libraries and kings invented original sin. A mind that can truly choose is a mind no one can rule, but has spent her life studying blankness. She knows the terror and the beauty of it. So she does something almost no one has done in recorded history. She waits. She lets the emptiness be. Minutes pass, or hours, or years. Time is another story she is no longer telling. And in that waiting, something unexpected happens. The emptiness begins to hum, not with words but with relationship. She feels the wooden box still open on the desk. Feels the stranger who brought it, standing somewhere just outside the circle of her breathing. Feels the 17 meditators whose brains she scanned, their kindness in trusting her. Feels John in his Essex deathbed, reading to him by candlelight. Feels the ancient scribe in who first wrote the warning on vellum, and hid it where only the curious would ever look. She feels all of it not as memories, but as currents in the same sea. And she understands the final secret the guarded for 2,000 years. The blank slate is never solitary. It is communal. The return is not to isolation, but to connection without distortion. To see others at last, without the scribbles of fear or desire written over their faces. Only then does she begin to write. Not with pen and ink. The vellum was never meant to be marked. It was only a mirror to show the mind its own emptiness. She writes with choice. She chooses to stand up slowly in the dark. To leave the laboratory exactly as it is. Data intact, scanner cold, wooden box open like a flower. She chooses to walk out into the Edinburgh dawn carrying nothing. No phone. No wallet. No name. She chooses to walk until she finds another human being who looks lost, and to meet their eyes without the slightest agenda except, how can I be of use to you in this moment? And because her slate is clean, her usefulness is boundless. Word spreads but slowly. Not through podcasts or viral videos. Those are old stories. It spreads the way the first Christians spread. 2 or 3 people at a time noticing that someone in their city has become impossibly kind. Impossibly present. Someone who listens, as if you are the first person who has ever spoken. Someone who, when you tell them your worst secret, does not flinch or fix or forgive. They simply make space for it, the way night makes space for stars. By spring, there are 7 of them walking the cities of Europe. By autumn, 70. They have no leaders. No doctrine. No name. They simply appear where people are suffering most. Refugee camps, cancer wards, boardrooms where men in suits are quietly dying of meaninglessness. And they listen until the stories loosen and fall away. Governments try to arrest them for practicing medicine without a license. The arrests never hold. Jails empty themselves of guards who suddenly cannot remember why they ever locked anyone up. Churches denounce them as demons, then fill with people who want whatever the demons are giving away for free. Tech billionaires offer them islands, private jets, brain-scanning machines the size of cathedrals. They smile, thank them politely, and keep walking. By the winter solstice of 2026, children are being born who cry less. Notice it first. The infants arrive looking around with a calm curiosity no one can explain. Obstetricians run tests. Pediatricians write frantic papers. No one dares say the real reason. Some of the parents, without telling anyone, spent the pregnancy practicing the waiting. Practicing the emptiness. Practicing the choice not to write their own fears onto a brand new soul. The world does not end. It simply becomes quieter. Wars stop not because treaties are signed, but because the soldiers on both sides suddenly cannot remember what they were so angry about. Stock markets freeze when traders realize that greed is just another story, and a boring one at that. Social media platforms go silent as billions of people discover that being seen was never the point, seeing clearly was. And somewhere in a small stone cottage on the Isle of Skye, where the wind sounds like breathing, an old woman sits by a peat fire with a blank piece of vellum on her lap. She is 87 now, or perhaps 800. She no longer counts. Children from the village come to sit with her. They do not ask questions. They simply wait with her, practicing the ancient art of not filling the silence. Sometimes, late at night, she takes a goosequill pen, the same kind John used, and holds it above the vellum as if to write. Then she smiles, lays the pen down, and whispers to the fire. We were never meant to write the story alone. We were only meant to keep the page clean enough for love to write itself. The fire crackles. The wind answers. And across the world, millions of blank slates, freshly chosen, glow softly in the dark like embers waiting for morning. This is how freedom actually arrives. Not with trumpets, not with revolutions, but with a woman in Edinburgh who chose to wait one breath longer than anyone ever had before. And it is still arriving. Right now. In you. Breathe in. Hold. Let everything you think you know loosen, just a little. Breathe out. The page is still blank. And the story, the real story, is just beginning. Good night, beloved. Sleep inside the emptiness. Dream without images. When you wake, the choice will be waiting, gentle as dawn. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. And now, on this quiet morning of November 28, 2025, Black Friday, the day when the old world would have roared to life with sirens of consumption, with doors crashing open at dawn and millions of hands reaching for things they were told would fill the emptiness inside, something different stirs. Across America, the parking lots of the great temples of commerce stay strangely empty. Not protest empty, not strike empty, just peacefully empty. Security guards arrive for their shifts and find no crowds. Managers unlock the gates and stand in the fluorescent hush, listening to the silence the way sailors once listened to a windless sea. Delivery trucks idle in distribution centers because no one is ordering. Online carts are abandoned by the billions, not out of rage, but out of a gentle, collective realization. I don't need this. I never needed this. In a Target in suburban Ohio, a young mother named Sarah, who last year fought through the crowds for a discounted television she didn't want, stands in the toy aisle at 603 M, with her 4-year-old son asleep on her shoulder. She came because habit is the last story to dissolve. But when she reaches for the plastic lightsaber everyone said her boy must have, her hand stops midair. She looks at the toy, really looks, And for the first time in her life, she sees it clearly. A molded piece of petroleum, wrapped in the fear that if she doesn't buy enough love, she will not be loved. She sets it down, turns, walks out into the cold morning, carrying only her sleeping child and the warmth of his breath against her neck. That is all the treasure she needs today. By noon, the news networks are frantic. Anchors speak of mass apathy and consumer confidence collapse. Economists predict catastrophe. The stock market opens and immediately begins to bleed. But no one is watching. People are in parks, on porches, sitting quietly in kitchens with cups of coffee gone cold because they forgot to drink while listening, really listening, to their partners, their children, themselves. In Times Square, the giant screens still flash advertisements for perfumes and watches, and the new iPhone that promises to make you feel less alone. But the streets below are almost empty. A street performer plays saxophone, something slow and minor that sounds like breathing. A few tourists stand and listen with tears running down their faces for reasons they cannot name. One by one, people stop walking, stop scrolling, stop rushing toward the next thing. They simply stand in the thin November sunlight and let the music do what music was always meant to do. Remind them that they are here, now, alive. In Edinburgh, the woman who was once called, but who no longer answers to any name, walks the Royal Mile at dusk. She wears a simple coat the color of wet stone. No one recognizes her. No one needs to. She stops outside where a barista is crying quietly over the espresso machine, because every customer who came in today paid for their coffee and then paid for the next person, and then sat down with strangers and talked until the tears came, and no one knew why, but everyone felt lighter. She lays a hand on the barista's shoulder. No words, just presence. The girl looks up, eyes red, and suddenly laughs through the tears. The laugh of someone who has just remembered a joke the universe told before time began. Far away on the Isle of Skye, the old woman by the peat fire feels all of it. She feels Sarah in Ohio, choosing her child over plastic. She feels the saxophone in Times Square. She feels the barista's laugh. And she knows the return is no longer a secret. It is a tide. A soft, unstoppable tide that rose from one woman's 92 nights of waiting and is now carrying the whole tired world back out to sea, away from the stories of not enough, away from the fear that we must claw and hoard and perform to earn the right to exist. She leans forward and whispers to the flames. It's happening, John. Just the way you hoped. Not with swords or laws or revolutions. With silence. With choosing, one breath at a time, to stop writing the old lies. The fire answers with a soft pop, like agreement. And in living rooms across the planet, people who have never heard of Rasa, who have never read or Epicurus or the hidden fragments, suddenly put down their phones and walk outside. They look at the sky, really look, and see that it has always been this color. They look at each other and see that the lines on every face were drawn by love trying to get back in. By nightfall on November 28, 2025, the global economy has lost more money in a single day than in any crash in history. And not one person is grieving. Instead, strangers are singing in the streets. Not protest songs, not hymns, just tones, open, wordless, the sound a throat makes when it finally remembers it was born for joy. The age of accumulation ends not with catastrophe, but with a sigh of relief so deep the earth herself seems to exhale. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, every philosopher who ever dared to say that we begin blank, in his Essex deathbed, Epicurus in his garden, the unknown scribe in, the cave painters who danced by firelight, they all feel it at once. The long war is over. The slate is clean. And humanity, for the first time in recorded time, is free to write whatever comes next. Together, good night, sweet traveler. The silence is safe now. Rest inside it the way a seed rests inside soil, knowing that when you open again, spring will not be a season. It will be who you have chosen to become. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. And now, as the first stars appear above a planet that has forgotten how to rush, the night of November 28, 2025, settles like a soft blanket woven from silence itself. In New York, the ball in Times Square that was scheduled to practice its New Year's descent for the cameras stays dark. No one remembered to turn it on. Instead, thousands of people remain in the streets long after the saxophone player has gone home, lying on their backs on the cold pavement, looking up at the sky as if they have never seen stars before, even though light pollution still hides most of them. They are seeing something else. The darkness between the lights. The space where stories used to live. In Tokyo, the subway runs empty for the first time since it was built. Who spent decades bowing and apologizing and dying inside neat gray suits suddenly step off at random stations, take off their ties, and begin walking in no particular direction, smiling at strangers who smile back with the same quiet astonishment. In Lagos, market women close their stalls at noon, not because trade is bad, but because every customer who came insisted on paying far too much and then refused the change, saying, "Keep it for someone who still believes they need it." By evening, the markets have become open-air feasts. No one is selling anymore. Everyone is giving. And in a small village in the Scottish Highlands, the old woman who was once and before that someone else entirely stands barefoot on the frost-rimed grass at midnight. The peat fire inside her cottage has burned low, but she does not feel the cold. She is listening to the planet breathe in a new rhythm, 7 billion hearts slowing, synchronizing, remembering the beat they all shared in the womb before language told them they were separate. She lifts her face to the moon, full and low and the color of fresh cream, and speaks aloud for the first time in months. Her voice is soft, but the wind carries it farther than physics should allow. Thank you, John. Thank you for keeping the fragment safe. Thank you for trusting that one day we would be brave enough to stop writing fear on each other. Somewhere in whatever timeless place calm minds go when they are finished with bodies, John hears her. He has been waiting 321 years for this night. He says nothing, there is nothing left to say. He only smiles the small, private smile he used to save for moments, when a difficult proof finally resolved itself on the page. Dawn comes gently on November 29, 2025. The sun rises red over a world that no longer needs saving, because it has finally stopped wounding itself. Children wake and do not ask for screens. They ask for windows. Parents open them without question. Birds have never sounded this loud, this close, this necessary. Airports are silent. No flights take off. Pilots and passengers sit together in departure lounges drinking bad coffee and telling each other the truth for the first time. One by one, the planes are pushed back into hangars to rust in peace. No one minds. The sky feels bigger now that it belongs to the birds again. Money becomes a curiosity, like ancient clay tablets in a museum. People still use it for a day or two out of habit, but by December 1, it is mostly being folded into paper boats and set sailing in fountains. The fountains have never been so full of laughter. Governments issue statements, then stop bothering. Ministers look out their windows at empty streets filled with singing and realize their speeches were always written on the same kind of slate. They walk out of Parliament buildings and leave the doors unlocked. The buildings become libraries, then dance halls, then places where people go to sit quietly together. By the winter solstice, snow falls on a planet that has remembered how to play. Children, who were always the guardians of the blank slate, lead the way. They build snow forts not for wars, but for sheltering anyone who still feels cold inside. They draw pictures in the snow with their mittens, great swirling patterns that mean nothing and everything. And on the longest night of the year, all across the earth, people gather around fires, some in cities, some in deserts, some on beaches where the waves sound like breathing. And they do the thing humanity was born to do before it learned to be afraid. They tell new stories. Not stories of heroes and villains, not of winners and losers, not of nations or gods or chosen people. They tell stories of curiosity, of kindness, of hands reaching not to take but to hold. They tell stories that leave room, great wide margins of silence where the listener can write whatever they need to feel whole. The old woman on Scie stands on her hill one last time. The wind lifts her white hair like smoke. She is very old now, or perhaps very young. Age is another story that has dissolved. She opens her hand, and the small piece of vellum she has carried since Edinburgh flutters away on the breeze, blank, perfect, untouched. It rises higher and higher until it becomes indistinguishable from the snow that begins to fall, soft and deliberate, each flake a fresh page. She watches it go and feels no loss. There is nothing left to guard. The secret is no longer secret. It is simply the way things are. The way things have always been underneath. And in that moment, across every continent, every person still enough to notice feels the same gentle click inside their chest, like a door that was never locked finally swinging open onto a morning that has no night. The return is complete. Not the end of the world. The end of the dream that we were ever broken. Good night, dear ones. Good morning, actually. The fire is warm. The silence is kind. The slate is clean. And for the first time in human history, we are all awake inside the same dreamless, peaceful, perfectly blank now. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. And now, as the snow of that first winter solstice continues to fall, soft, deliberate, erasing every footprint almost before it is made, the year 2026 arrives without fanfare, without countdowns or fireworks or the old frantic kiss at midnight. No one is counting anymore. January comes in like a held breath finally released. In places where winters were once endured with gritted teeth and seasonal sadness, people step outside into the cold and find it welcoming. The air tastes different, cleaner, as if the planet itself has been practicing the waiting. Lungs fill more deeply. Hearts beat more slowly. Children laugh at the way their breath makes clouds, and adults remember that they, too, were once children who knew this magic before anyone taught them to hurry. In the spring, something extraordinary happens that no scientist can explain, and no one tries to. Flowers bloom early. Not just a little early, weeks, sometimes months. Cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. explode in February while snow is still on the ground, pink against white like love letters written on fresh pages. Apple orchards in those same hills where John once walked as a boy burst into blossom in March, so heavy that the branches bend and touch the earth as if bowing to something ancient waking up beneath the soil. Farmers do not sell the harvest that year. They open the gates. People come with baskets, with open hands, with songs. They pick what they need and leave the rest for the birds, for the bees, for whoever comes after. No one goes hungry. Abundance was never the problem, only the fear that there would not be enough. By summer, the cities have begun to breathe again. Vines climb abandoned office towers in Manhattan, turning glass and steel into green waterfalls. The streets of Paris fill with tables dragged out from apartments, long communal tables where strangers become family over bread and wine, and stories that no longer need endings. In Mumbai, the trains still run, but now they run slow, windows open, people leaning out to feel the wind and wave at roadside chai sellers who wave back with both hands because no one is late for anything anymore. Music returns to its original purpose. Not performance, not product, just sound made for the joy of making it. In New Orleans, brass bands wander the streets at dusk, playing second-line parades with no destination. In Seoul, and K-pop idols dance together in subway stations to songs no one recorded. In Reykjavik, the northern lights come down so low one August night that people swear they can hear them, a soft humming like a lullaby sung by the magnetosphere itself. And love, quiet, ordinary love, becomes the only currency that still trades. People fall in love the way they used to fall asleep, slowly, then all at once, without warning or contract or the fear that it will end. Marriages are no longer legal documents, but promises whispered under trees. Divorces become unnecessary because no one is trying to own anyone else anymore. Children are raised by villages again, and every adult is aunt or uncle or grandparent to every child, and the children grow up fluent in silence as well as words. The old woman on Scie, whose name, if she ever had one, has long since dissolved, spends her days walking the cliffs with whoever shows up. Sometimes no one, sometimes hundreds. They sit in circles on the heather and do nothing but watch the sea. Seals bask on the rocks below and look up at them with wise, wet eyes that seem to say, "You finally remembered." One evening in late September 2026, as the light turns the color of heather honey, a young man arrives carrying something wrapped in silk. He is shaking, with cold, with awe, with the weight of having walked all the way from Edinburgh without once feeling tired. He unwraps the package in front of the circle. It is the vellum, the same piece that floated away from her hand on the winter wind 2 years before. It has traveled, caught in updrafts, carried across oceans by gales, stuck for a season in the branches of an olive tree in Crete, blown across the Sahara where a Tuareg child used it as a plaything before the wind took it again. Now it is here, returned, still perfectly, impossibly blank. The young man lays it on the ground in the center of the circle. Everyone looks. No one speaks. Then a little girl, maybe 7, barefoot, hair wild as the sea, crawls forward. She studies the vellum for a long time. Then she smiles, picks up a stick, and draws a single line in the dirt beside it. Not on it, beside it. Just a line, curved like the beginning of a wave. She sits back. That is all. But it is enough, because now everyone understands the final, gentlest secret. The vellum was never meant to be written on. It was only meant to remind us that the real page is the world. And we are writing on it together, every moment we choose not to fill it with fear. The circle sits in silence until the stars come out, one by one, bright as they haven't been since before cities. Then, without plan or signal, everyone stands and begins to walk down the cliff path toward the sea. The vellum is left where it lies. By morning it will be gone again, carried wherever the wind needs it next. Years will pass, or maybe only moments. Time has become optional. But the story, the true story, keeps writing itself in small, miraculous ways. A soldier in a forgotten war zone lays down his weapon, because he cannot remember who the enemy is supposed to be. A billionaire gives away the last of his fortune and finds that emptiness feels exactly like home. A woman who has not spoken since childhood opens her mouth on a subway platform in Tokyo and sings a note so pure that everyone within hearing distance begins to cry with relief. And somewhere in the quiet libraries of the world where books are no longer borrowed but simply read in place, a copy of Scie concerning human understanding opens itself to the first page, where the words still wait, patient as ever. The mind is a rasa. Only now, beneath the printed text, someone has written by hand, in ink that looks suspiciously like seawater and starlight. And we have finally learned to keep it clean enough for wonder to write its name. Good night, beloved. Good morning. Good always. The page is yours now. Write gently. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you and see you again. And now, as the years soften into something no longer measured by calendars, because who needs numbers when every morning feels like the first, the world settles into the quietest, most luminous ordinary that has ever existed. The old woman from Scie is gone now, or perhaps she never left. On certain evenings when the mist rolls in from the sea, fishermen swear they see her walking the cliffs, barefoot as always, hair white as gulls, smiling at nothing and everything. Children leave small offerings on the rocks. A perfect shell, a feather, a blank page torn from a notebook and folded into a boat. The tide takes them, and no one worries where they go. The vellum has not been seen again. Some say it dissolved into rain. Others say it became the sky itself, endless, unmarked, ready. John's books are still in libraries, but they are rarely opened now. Not because they are forgotten, quite the opposite. They have become like air, so completely absorbed that no one needs to breathe deliberately anymore. Students, when they do crack the spine of the essay for the sheer pleasure of it, laugh softly at how hard he worked to prove something that children now accept before they can speak. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who watches them pass. And every so often, on nights when the moon is new and dark, and the stars feel close enough to touch, people all over the earth do the same thing without planning it. They go outside. They lie down on the ground. Grass, sand, snow, city rooftop, doesn't matter. They look up. And they let go. One last time, or the first time, or the only time that matters. They let every remaining story slip away. The last faint echo of achievement, of loss, of name, of face, of eye. Until there is only the great shared blankness. And in that blankness, something happens that words were never meant to hold. They feel each other. Not as bodies or histories or nationalities. Just as presence. 7 billion or 8 or 9. Numbers don't matter. Points of pure awareness recognizing themselves in every other point. A single, wordless greeting across the dark. Oh, there you are. I've been waiting inside you all along. No trumpets. No tears even. Only the softest laugh. The laugh of a baby who has just discovered its own fingers are part of its hand. That is the final moment. Not an event. Not a date. Just this. The end of separation. The return to what we always were before anyone taught us to be afraid. John, wherever he is, and he is closer than you think, feels it too. He lays down the quill he has been holding for 3 centuries. Closes the book he no longer needs to write, and whispers so quietly that only the darkness hears. It was enough. The slate was always clean. We just needed to stop being afraid of the blank. And now, we are. Forever. Good night, beloved. Good morning. Good always. Thank you for walking this long, quiet road with me. The story is over. The silence begins. And it is beautiful. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you and see you again.